Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we leaf through our memories to dog-ear our favorite magazines and talk about the future of the medium moving forward.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, where we simplify the world of marketing for humans. I'm Shad Conley, and with me is my co-host, Patrick Jebber. And Patrick, sometimes it seems like the whole world has gone mad.
Mad TV or Mad Magazine?
Well, we're talking about Mad Magazine, but I guess in this case, it would seem like the whole world has gone not mad, or not mad anymore.
They've gone glad?
Unmad?
Yeah.
We're losing mad, is the news here, in case you haven't heard.
And Mad Magazine cover boy Alfred E. Neuman finally has something to worry about. After 67 years, the satirical magazine will soon vanish from newsstands. DC Comics revealed the news last night. Mad will be sold in comic shops and mailed to subscribers, but it will feature recycled material from previous issues. Songwriter Weird Al Yankovic is among those lamenting Mad's downsizing. He tweeted that it's, quote, pretty much the reason I turned out weird.
A little bit of an end of an era there.
Mad Magazine recently made the decision to stop printing after 67 years. How'd you take the news, Patrick?
Kind of funny. I don't know that I knew about the news until we were talking about it.
So you're taking it right now. How are you taking it? Do you need an IV? Are you going to faint?
I'm literally not mad. It's an end of an era, as we like to sometimes say in situations like this.
Did you read Mad Magazine? Were you ever a Mad fan?
When I was a kid, yeah, I remember the illustrated character that was always on the front.
Alfred E. Neuman?
Yeah, I do remember it fondly, too. How about you?
I used to buy them all the time. I liked them. I had that weird sensibility where it appealed to me. I would see the covers with Alfred E. Neuman, and I'd be like, this is funny. This is for me. I don't know if I liked it quite as much as Weird Al Yankovic, who tweeted out, Mad Magazine is part of the reason I'm weird now. He's going to miss it so much. But I definitely was into it. And they used to have on the back cover, they'd have the fold-ins where you could fold the back cover and it would make one picture turn into something else. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember.
Which I always thought those were really interesting. And then they'd do the parodies of popular movies at the time where they'd make everybody look really funny and give people funny names based on the actors or characters or something like that. So I don't know. It worked for me. As I was a kid, I haven't bought one in probably, 25 years or more, but it's one of those things I was just happy that existed in the world, even if I hadn't thought about it until I just heard this news,
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that, where this thing still exists, whether it's from your childhood or some point in your life. It's sad when you see that thing go away.
There's like comfort to knowing it's there, even if you don't really think about it all that much. Until that point where it actually leaves, right?
Yeah. A great example of that would be totally unrelated, but when they announced they were going to stop making Twinkies, right?
Oh, people went nuts.
Yeah. And it was like, I hadn't thought about a Twinkie since I was a little kid. And we talked about it on an episode of Speaking Human and that idea that it would never be there anymore, right?
Yeah. The universe without the Twinkie seems like a sadder universe. Even if you don't particularly know why. Once like a week passes, you're like, well, what do I really need a Twinkie for?
So, pretty sad for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
At least in our childhood, that day and age, magazines, like this was one of the only forms of entertainment for us, other than television, obviously. We didn't have phones. You didn't have the whole world at your fingertips, right? So having a magazine was something to connect you with the world in some way. And, I know that dates us. We're really old men, right?
Go play with a magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was just pre-internet. There were newspapers, there was TV, and there were magazines. They were just a big piece of how you got your news and how you got your stories and how you got your entertainment. In our internet world, they've become less essential, which is why we've seen so many of them. It's not just Mad. We've seen in the past decade plus Life, Redbook, Computer World, Self, Money, Glamour. We just saw ESPN, the magazine, like in the past year, Brides, Newsweek, Jet. The list goes on and on of magazines that have made the decision to stop printing because it's just, one, it's kind of costly to print magazines, but the demand that was once there just isn't there, even for these big name titles.
Because people really aren't buying those periodicals on a newsstand like they used to. So they really rely on the subscriber base, where they're mailing those out to your residence or your business or whatever. And if you don't have that, it's not good.
Yeah, I can understand why. When I look at websites and newspapers, websites haven't quite captured the experience of reading a newspaper yet, They haven't quite got that down, but they have pretty much replicated the experience of reading a magazine. At least I think so. And they've probably even improved upon it. You can get information quicker, they're more convenient to access, a lot of times they're free. It's just a lot of the same stuff. It's formatted in much the same way as a magazine. For me personally, the way I used to read magazines is the way I read websites now. Mm-hmm. So they line up in a lot of the same ways. So you can kind of see why people are like, I just don't need this anymore because I have this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing about magazines, newspapers might be daily, but magazines were just a little bit more in depth on niche subject matter that you might be interested in. And so, well-designed websites can give you that same experience. And magazines, I feel like, have done a great job at giving you that printed version experience in their mobile apps. That's one thing I will say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get Wired magazine, and the digital version that you get through the app that they have is great. I actually really like that experience almost better than a printed magazine,
Yeah. And I think you nailed it with what they provided, the unique value they provided. Mm-hmm. More in depth than what you get on like the news or in the newspaper, and more niche, more to the general topics you're interested in, whether that's computers or sports or music. Mm-hmm. That's what magazines were for, and that's what websites are the most popular websites. Kind of a lot of them do now.
Yeah, and do well. You can get that information so much more timely.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of magazine writers have gone.
Yeah.
But once upon a time, there was just these infinite aisles in grocery stores or these racks and racks of all these different magazines covering all these different topics. Now you look at the current list of top 5 magazines by circulation in the U.S., and it's not a super exciting list. It doesn't really look like this day and age. I mean, the top 5, number 1, AARP Magazine. Number 2, AARP Bulletin. Number 3, Better Homes and Gardens. Number 4, Game Informer. All right. And number 5, Good Housekeeping. Most of that, you're like, it could be 1955, it could be 2019. It shows you where we are with a lot of the things that have folded.
Yeah, I saw where the fastest growing magazine brand in the United States is Motorcyclist.
No, that's interesting.
I guess I wouldn't even have made my list if I was guessing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a magazine.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What does the future hold for magazines? Are we on the verge of a magazine extinction? Are they going to go the way of cassette tapes, rotary phones, VCRs? Are they one of these things? Are we witnessing the end of the magazine, I guess?
Not if my kids still have those fundraisers through school. Because let me tell you,
they still sell those, huh?
Oh, every year. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think I get a lot of good quality magazines through the schools, and I do enjoy magazines. I do like printed stuff. I mean, I'm still of the dinosaur age where printed materials appeal to me. Touching something, flipping the pages, smelling the paper. It's a strange world without that, I think. But if you were to ask me, I think magazines still hold a pretty strong place in the world itself, and probably will for the foreseeable future. I was looking at the stats from Statista. They were showing the number of magazines just in the United States from 2002 to 2018. And in 2002, there were 5,340 magazines. And in 2018, there are a little over 7,200 magazines. So it's been a gradual incline, not decline, which I would have thought had been the opposite. So they're still there. And I think what you could really take away from the statistics, especially over the last 16 years, is that the medium isn't dying. It's relatively stable. I often think about you and I having this conversation. Remember 10, 15 years ago when they said print was dead?
Oh, yeah.
Then after that, they said email was dead. I think magazines are the same thing for me. It's like, no, they're always going to have a place because I think there's always going to be people who like that form of entertainment. To me, it's about how they integrate digital into their strategy. Because, as time goes on, if they haven't already, they need to have a digital strategy to offer the publication in both formats. Because there's always going to be the people like me who I get wired. I get wired print and I get wired digital. I love the digital experience that they've created, but man, I sometimes just like to go back and read a magazine. What do you think?
I think I agree with you on a lot of points you made there. One of the key ones being, I go back to the same thing you do, which is after, a decade of headlines about print is dead, print is dying, I think I now say never say die about anything,
Yeah.
Magazines are not going to die by any means. It's just, for one thing, there'll always be waiting rooms, airports, and checkout lines, which will keep the magazine alive, at least in some form. You'll probably see a more limited role, in how people print, printing more limited editions. Some publications go to monthly or quarterly. I think that's going to become a more common thing, just printing less. I think there's an art, a beauty, and cool to magazines that people like you and me appreciate, even if it isn't the most functional thing anymore. I also think of my own experience I've had with books. I was really excited at one point. I went and got a Kindle, used it for years, bought dozens of books, read dozens of books on it. I don't know what happened. At some point, though, I was just like, I don't like this anymore, and I want to go back to reading regular books. And that's what I did. And then the past few years, I've just been reading regular books again. I don't know what made that click, what made that turn for me, but that's what happened. And now the Kindle just collects dust and I just go back to reading physical books like I was before. Not saying the same thing will happen with magazines by any means, but these things do happen. There's like a little technological excitement. And then in some ways, sometimes you're just like, there was something I appreciated about having that actual thing in my hand, that actual paper. There's always a place for those things, I think, and I don't think that's going to go away completely by any means, though I do agree with you. I think the combination of print and digital is where it's at, and finding that balance is pretty important for the brands that are going to survive moving forward.
Yeah, and that's sometimes how you have to do it when you have a tighter budget.
Yeah, so some good stuff. A lot of magazine love. They're still alive, man.
They are still alive. Site had a statistic that there are 224 million magazine readers in the U.S. Doesn't that seem high?
It's much more than I would think.
Yeah. Also really interesting to note, they also say the share of people who use magazine ads to discover new podcasts, 24%. So a quarter of the people reading magazines use it to find new podcasts. It seems high, I guess, because you're using a print medium to find stuff that's digital to listen to, which is a totally different, you're listening and you're not reading, you know what I mean? So it's not like you're trying to find a digital version of the print publication or something like that,
It seems like trying to push two opposite sides of the magnet together. It doesn't even seem like they would go together. And I've just never seen a magazine ad for a podcast. Have you?
I can't say that I have, but then again, maybe we're just not reading the right magazines, obviously.
Or enough magazines.
Or enough, yeah. So
That might change after this episode.
that's right.
Well, in a minute, we'll each share our top 3 most memorable magazines from our lifetime. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
Today's sponsor is Farmers Insurance. Insurance can be confusing, overwhelming, and time-consuming. At Hire Insurance Agency, we remove the guesswork and hassle, helping you protect what matters most. We offer a wide range of auto, home, business, and life insurance policies to help you meet your specific needs. Call 844-543-3463 or visit hireinsurance.com. That's HYRE insurance.com for more information.
So, Shad,
Yeah.
great question. What is, or was, your level of magazine readership now or in the past? You know, where did you read them when you were a big magazine reader, if you were? And did you buy them at stores or did you have subscriptions? Do you have subscriptions? What's that look like? Tell us what that looks like to you.
For me, unfortunately, it is mostly in the past. I'm trying to think of even the last time I read a full magazine, and it's probably like a office waiting room situation because I just don't read them that much anymore. I don't know if I'm pretty average in that respect or less than average, but that's kind of where I'm at. I read them a lot when I was younger. I used to go to, places like Barnes & Noble or even grocery stores and just kind of sit there and like take them off the rack and just sit there and read through the whole thing. I've had a few subscriptions in my lifetime, like off and on. A lot of the times that was because I got them some sort of deal. You mentioned like your kids bringing home the like sign up things like that. Sometimes I've even gotten subscriptions that I don't even know how I've got them, but I just ended up, they sent me, I think Esquire I was getting for years and I had no idea how I was getting it or why I was getting it. That's mostly the picture of my readership and a lot of offices, airports, those kind of places. What about you?
Thinking about this question, it was a trip down memory lane for me because when I think back, I've always been a big magazine reader, probably much more than books, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I have some form of ADD where it was hard to spend that much time. So the fact that you could read an article, put it down, just like some
Less commitment?
Less commitment, yeah. So I always was a big magazine reader. I used to love to go to our local Borders bookshop or the Barnes & Nobles,
Yeah.
like you mentioned. And just,
Yeah, that was another one.
Yeah.
Forgot about Borders.
yeah, Borders is gone now. But especially when I was in college, to me, how I learned a lot of new things that were coming out because even though the internet was around and that was a medium, it wasn't quite what it is today.
Yeah, it wasn't as accessible and there just wasn't as much there.
Yeah, yeah. And as I've gotten older, we have magazine subscriptions for in the office. And when the kids come home with the fundraiser, I feel obligated to buy, the whatever magazines they're selling so that they can win the strange little tchotchkes that are reward for selling X amount or whatever. But so
Pretty similar. So that's where we're coming from. Let's get into, we each have 3 magazines we have strong or fond memories of. And we'll talk a little bit about what we remember most about them or what we liked about them. What's your first one, Patrick?
So my first, this is kind of one and the same. I always think of them as one and the same, even though they are separate. But Popular Science or Popular Mechanics, I always loved that magazine. I always got Popular Science first. Just been a staple of my educational diet. Learning about things of sci-fi nature that are being developed. And I felt like Popular Science always had that subject matter down really, really well. And I have a bunch of Popular Mechanics that my grandfather had.
Whoa.
Yeah, the really, really old periodicals, almost like little Reader's Digest books that you would see on the back of people's toilets and stuff when you were a kid.
Yeah.
But it made me realize the age of this publication. So Popular Science Monthly, as the publication was originally called, was founded in May of 1872.
That's crazy.
Going back to your comment, they switched to the bi-monthly publication after 144 years of monthly publication. And then I think this year they went to quarterly.
Okay, that was going to be my question. I was wondering if they still print it because I have seen a lot of their stuff on the web.
Yeah.
I've gone to their site several times, but that's a really good one. I remember reading Popular Science several times in the school library.
Oh, yeah. That was a place to find it for sure. I think one of the reasons why I love science so much today is just reading that magazine growing up and being excited for all the things that were coming up in the future, Like I remember reading about battery-powered cars decades ago. And the fact that they were already talking about this is the next thing, something that publication did really well was get you excited about things that maybe weren't reality yet, but they would be.
And it always had very eye-catching and cool covers, I remember too.
Yeah. So how about you? What do you have in your list?
Well, from the deep to the slightly more shallow, some would say. I'll go with one of the first magazines I was actually subscribed to, which was Entertainment Weekly, or EW, as it's now known, I believe. So I got a subscription to this when it first started sometime in the 90s. I was a big movie fan. I'm not sure how I ended up with a subscription to it, but this was a magazine I really liked because it had a bunch of short movie reviews. They also had music reviews, book reviews, and then they had video cassette reviews and stuff like that, which I always really liked too, because then I could find movies to check out on video that I had never heard of before, you know. They also did something which, you know, I find interesting, and we even talk about a lot on our other podcast, MoMA, to this point, was this first time I'd ever seen anybody break down box office figures for the week, which was something I was like fascinated by. It's the first time I'd seen that done, and it made it feel like movies were in competition with each other, which I'd never thought about. You know, they showed you how much money everything was making, who was coming in first through 10. Now it's kind of commonplace, but at the time, I don't know, it was new to me. This stuff's all over the web now, but at that time, magazines were the place you found it.
That's such a great example of something that you find today all the time online. But back then, that information, that format, you didn't get it in any other medium. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I will say one of my favorite things, you know, I was never all that interested in the feature stories, but I always liked those regular sections, those shorter sections and blurbs and stuff. That's always more what I was attracted to in magazines. I don't know why, but maybe that's me preparing for the internet to come.
Yeah. Well, isn't that true? I mean, you know, I don't have time to read 1,000 words. I can only read 100 max right now.
Give me the short summary.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes. So next one on my list is Macworld. And I used to read this way back before Apple was the Apple we know today. When I got into graphic design, the use of Macintosh computers were a big part of the biz, you know? So I read a lot about them via magazines to get really the best information I could get on, you know, how to fix the computers for myself and just little things. I enjoyed learning about the computers. You know, I think computers is one of those niche subjects that we were talking about that is so timely. That is one area where you're like, I know this stuff already. I already saw all of the articles online about it. The new iPhone that came out, yeah, I saw that. You know what I mean? I saw that information already, so I don't really need a printed publication to get that. So it was the oldest Macintosh magazine still in publication until 2014 when IDG, the parent company, announced it was discontinuing the print edition and laid off most of its staff. But it continued its online version. So there you go. A great example of a publication that died a horrible death and then resurrected online.
Like a lot of things, though. I mean, I'll be surprised if we have anything that hasn't changed in some way.
Yeah. A little sad in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely remember that one. And for all the Apple aficionados, even before that became a much bigger interest group, I guess, than it is now. I don't know when it started and how long it ran for. Do you know that?
It started in 1984.
Oh, okay. It started in 84. The commercial.
Because they knew it was going to be big.
Yeah.
How about you? What else you have?
Next up, I have another pretty popular magazine that's also changed its schedule a little bit. Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated is probably one of my favorite office reads. I had a brief subscription to it. It came weekly, I remember, and I just remember these just piling up, and I'd be like, I'd read a few pages, and then I'd get another one, read a few pages, get another one, and I'd be like, I just can't. This is too much. So much information in it, like when they were predicting what was going to happen in different leagues and stuff like that. But it looks like they changed. They're publishing 12 double issues a year, and then they have their special issues as well. I think they used to do 52 issues a year, and it was weekly. From what I remember.
I remember when it was weekly, and I'll tell you, man, I think everybody probably felt that same way. It's just so much that it was hard to keep up with it. I think Time was also like that at some point, wasn't it? Weekly?
I don't know if Time was, but Newsweek, I think, was. You just remember seeing them on the newsstand all the time, you know, with a new cover. People, obviously, who were really into that more so than me were just probably like, couldn't wait to get in the mail and were just gobbling it up as soon as they got it. But it's definitely one of the classics of the magazine medium, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure. Sports Illustrated. Sports.
Yeah. There's obviously a huge sports fan base in America.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I do like that one. But again, going back to I don't know if they needed to be weekly.
Yeah, at a certain time when that was how people got their sports news, and there were probably people who were even on a national level before, like ESPN, waiting to get the magazine in the mail to find out who won college football games across the nation.
Yeah, true. Unless you're Marty McFly and you get your information from the Sports Almanac.
Exactly, which everybody should.
Everybody should. So my last one, I'm going way, way back with this one. Thrasher. Do you remember this magazine?
Vaguely.
Okay, so for myself, I was in, I'd say middle school. I was into skateboarding. My friends were into skateboarding. This magazine, which was founded in January of 81, which I was only 4 at the time when it was founded. So I wasn't really skateboarding then. But by the time I was in middle school, Thrasher was the magazine we were all reading. Because if you loved skateboarding, this was the way you got your information about like what was going on in the skateboarding universe. But I did read that the circulation via 2011 was about 250,000. So not the biggest circulation.
So it's still going.
Yeah, it's still going. The skateboarding industry, it's a $5 billion a year industry. Now it's very acceptable to ride a skateboard. Back then it was like, you kids get off your skateboards and get real jobs, And Thrasher was a really big proponent of skateboarding. It was founded by these two guys, and it was really a way for them to promote their independent truck company. If you're familiar with skateboards, trucks are the metal component that you attach skateboard wheels to, and then you attach it to the actual wood board. So that's the truck. So they were actually using the magazine. They started it to promote the truck company, which is kind of fascinating to me because it was really a promotional tactic. At least it started off that way.
That's a really good pick, though. That is a magazine. I can't even picture it. I remember the name.
The logo is really unique, and I'm sure you probably would recognize it if you saw it because they still sell merchandise and everything too. But yeah, it's something that goes way back in my childhood, something that I have very, very fond memories of.
It's one of the reasons you ended up becoming a professional skateboarder, I think, right?
Well, yeah, in my spare time. Yeah. It's funny when you do an exercise like this and think about these things, you go, wow. I haven't thought about that probably in 20 years, but that was a big part of our childhood,
Yeah. Skateboarding at that time was such a different thing, such a big deal and the new rock and roll at that moment, this kind of new thing that was emerging that was just the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it was cool, and it also was very controversial too, It reminds me of the era of parental advisory, explicit lyrics, the labels they would put on CDs and stuff like that all kind of happened or coincided generally around the same time, right?
Yeah, there was a little bit of rebellion to it.
Yeah, rebellion.
Speaking of explicit lyrics, that goes nicely into my next pick, though a little more mainstream, which, you have some great picks on your list. But my last one, a magazine that I probably was subscribed to the longest, especially when I was younger and I was getting, really into music and looking for new music to listen to. One of the ones I read the most when I was at places like Borders and Barnes & Noble, along with Spin, which Spin went out of print. I think in 2012, they stopped having a print edition. But the magazine I'm talking about here is Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
And one of the things is always exciting to see who was on their cover, the top music stars of the day, and oftentimes it was controversial. So their covers were always kind of interesting, whether as a piece of art or what they were trying to say, or, the conversation that kind of swirled around them. The other thing that I like to read Rolling Stone for was just discovering new music I might like who's the rising rock star, what's the new song or new album that everybody's talking about, especially later on when it was really easy to listen to music online and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go listen to this because this sounds like something I'd be interested in. Prior to that era, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go to the music store and maybe I'm going to listen to this CD or maybe I'm going to buy this CD based on how it's described in this magazine. So it just had that prominent role in my life, but it was one of those magazines that I always was immediately drawn to a lot of times because I have that interest in pop culture and music.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think about what you said about the covers and who was on the cover, because that was a very, very big deal. It's very similar to the way people treated Time magazine. Whoever is on the cover of that Time magazine's Person of the Year.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a real badge of honor to be on the cover of that magazine. That it really said something about the impact you were making in the music industry, mostly music, right?
Yep.
Yeah, such a great memory of a lot of those covers and seeing them. Like I think back to there was one with Kurt Cobain on the cover. It's just a sign of the times.
Yeah, definitely. And this was a time, there was that period of time where magazine covers were just what people were talking about. I mean, and it still happens somewhat, but not like they were, because it would spread like a tidal wave. Everybody would be talking about that for a minute. And it doesn't happen as much now because I think things just get released or get leaked out, and there's the social wave where people are talking about it, and it's just not as much of a thing as it was at one point.
Isn't that weird? It's just a totally different world. It seems like so long ago.
Yeah, a world of slower reaction times of we're waiting for our print to drop. Well, great list there, Patrick. Do you have any honorables, anything you want to like throw out there as things you thought about or you just wanted to mention their name?
There's lots of magazines I've loved over the years, but one that I found more in recent years that I love to read, and that's Outside Magazine. It's a fantastic read, and it has a lot of articles for people who just want to connect with their outdoors versions of themselves. It's got gear and advocacy articles and trip ideas and all kinds of things that just have to do with the outdoors, really.
Yeah, I would just note, one you mentioned is Wired. I used to like to read Wired on occasion because just kind of into tech, and that was one I occasionally would gravitate to if it was around. Time, Vanity Fair, People, these were all magazines that I just saw all the time. I talked about the ones where people were always talking about the covers. Those were magazines where people would be talking about, did you see what was on, blah, blah, blah. And then one last one I'll mention was a magazine I read when I was younger, was Fangoria magazine, which was like a very niche horror magazine. Did you ever see this?
Oh, yeah.
It's about like horror movies, and it would have pictures of gore and horror movies and stuff like that. It was kind of great. I'm not sure if it still exists or not, but one of those magazines you wouldn't want your parents to find you with because they'd be like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, those are some good ones. I really like those a lot. Yeah. So I think overall we've got a nice blend of a lot of different magazines for sure.
Yeah. So many great magazines out there. Makes me just think of my love for the mag.
For the rag.
For the rag and the mag.
Yeah. So on that note, everyone, it's that time. Let's get our final nugget of human wisdom. Human wisdom.
All right. So we'll do something a little different for our human wisdom today. We're both going to share some human wisdom. A Twitter-linked takeaway, 280 characters or less from today's episode. Did you come up with something?
I went extreme with mine. I pushed it to the limits. And when I say pushed it to the limits, I pushed it to the opposite end of the spectrum, meaning I didn't go all the way to 280, but it goes back to something we said earlier in the podcast when we talked about people saying, oh, it's dead. This thing is dead. You know, email's dead, print's dead. And my Twitter-inspired nugget of human wisdom is never say die. Hashtag magazines forever. And that's it. That's it, man. I mean, never say die. These things will be around for the foreseeable future, I should say. I'm sure maybe 1,000 years from now, people will be like, print is dead. Magazines are dead. But not right now.
I like their future voice.
Yeah, that was their evolved voices.
It's like vampires.
Yeah.
It's really good. But I came up with two different ones. You could tell me which one you like better.
Okay.
Here's number one. While magazines may no longer have a place on our coffee tables, they'll always have a place in our hearts. Huh?
All right.
Number two. Your bathroom may look cleaner without that stack of magazines, but those excursions to the John just aren't the same. That one needs something more in there, you know?
Yeah, I'll have to sit with that one on the John.
Yeah, we can make that one better.
Both going in the right direction, for sure. Twitter is such a fleeting moment anyway, so it's okay. We can always just improve on it in the next tweet, so.
That's true. Or somebody will tell us how it could be better.
Yeah, they'll be like, that would never make it into a magazine.
Don't print that.
That's all right. It's just digital. So that's it for today's episode, everyone. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast at speakinghuman.com. While you're there, click on the sign up link in the navigation to get emails with the latest marketing buzz delivered directly to your inbox every Friday. You could say it's just like a free magazine subscription, but on the internet.
What?
What?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Or should we say, that's mad? That's mad, I tell ya.
It's madder than Mad Magazine. It's mad!
Bringing it full circle.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.